filling in those back layers that I didn't get developmentally as well. I don't know,
Yeah, I don't know because, I've shared before with you sort of my experience of growing up and what I thought the social cultural messaging was against, what it meant to be a man and masculinity, and how I really didn't take on that identity. Like I knew that I was that thing, but it's never seemed to be any part of my active way in which I needed people to see me. I mean, I'm sure if somebody had misgendered me, that would probably make it very relevant and salient to me, and then I'd be a bit weirded out by that, and I'd be trying to correct it so that I fit in socially the way that I thought that I should. But sort of noticing as I did more developmental work and started working with people, in the stuff that you and I have done in sort of the authentic relating and the circling area, starting to sort of notice the patterns, typically, obviously, everybody's different, there's nuance, but noticing sort of the patterns and noticing for me in some ways, like I just really wasn't leaning in any particular way, like I had parts about me that, that I think were, would be stereotypically feminine, that felt fine and okay to me, and but I never felt that I gravitated to them, and I had these masculine parts that I wasn't really allowing myself to gravitate to. So sort of the idea of having, the idea of when polarity sort of came into my awareness, looking at David Data's work, the Way of the Superior Man, various complications aside with how it's written, in some way in there, it's not specifically necessarily aspirational for masculinity, because there's a lot of talk more about polarity being the importance, and not just that men have to be masculine and women have to be feminine. The idea is in a relationship, if you don't have polarity, you've got flatness, and therefore there's not a lot of life force. It's a lot of draining. And so I noticed sort of after reading that, I found myself leaning more into what was more stereotypically masculine, and starting to sort of take more of that on, like accepting the evolutionary biology aspect of it, of like, maybe that's, I'm going to feel better, or I'm going to be better, or I'm going to maximize my potential if I lean more into this particular direction. And I would like to think that I realize that is true. Like, I think I feel much more okay, even though I don't go around talk about how masculine I am. It actually feels a little bit more like something where I could say, like, if I had a hat and a list of things on identity, I would probably put male on there in a way in which I identify it, rather than in a way in which I just cognitively am aware of it because of my biology. So that sort of occurs to me that maybe I went through, or maybe still going through, and sort of leaning into that aspirational side of masculinity, as a cis person, and
Yeah.
getting the sense that I'm probably living a bit of a better life now. Not that I could ever identify anything was wrong, but I
Yeah.
just knew that, like, it don't seem to fit. Like, what's going on here? Why are
Yeah.
these guys talking about what it's like to be male, and these women are over here constantly talking about what it's like to be female? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about either of these things because they weren't relevant to me. But as I lean into
Yeah.
it, I feel, I don't know.
What do you think the difference? Yeah, what is that feeling or that
Well,
shift?
what do you mean the feeling? The feeling of,
Like you feel like your life is better, maybe, and like can you kind of elaborate on that at all, or is it like too
yeah.
nebulous? Or
Well, I guess, I mean, I'm certainly on the edge of my think. I haven't really thought about it, but I would probably say almost like a structure has been sort of created for me, almost like there's a boundary, like the boundaries. This is what matters, and I think I shared this with you before. And I think I'm like playing more full out in that.
yeah.
So there's more, yes, there's some of that, like I think I went through sort of a Gnostic, transformation in fairly subtle ways, but yet important ways. It's not like suddenly I had a hairless chest and then I grew hair on my chest. It's nothing quite like that. Always been very hairy, so that part never changed. But um, I get the sense it's probably this thing that you're talking about, in terms of actualization, that I have a frame in my mind, whether it's society's frame or not, of what that means, or moreness and suchness of masculinity. And I feel like that's being more and more integrated, whatever that idea is.
Wow.
So I guess, you know, it's an aspiration, but I guess it feels like a realization, like, and it's a different kind of okayness of like not feeling bothered that I wasn't identifying as male
Hmm.
in a particular way. Now it's almost like there's more of a pleasantness to it. I don't know what the word is. There's just a moreness and a suchness, I think, is probably the best I can explain it right now.
That was so cool. Thank you. I mean, that like mirrors my experience so well. Like that, you know,
Hmm.
with a little verbal tweaking, that could be like a transgender person's story about themselves, right? Like
Yeah.
cases, like,
Yeah, and that's what I like about you naming gender, you know, as an aspirational thing, because I actually think it's a way in which we can get away from the complexity of the cultural and social, you know, implications around trans and transitioning, and just looking at it as a thing that we all share. You know, if we can look at it, and then it makes, to me, the idea is it will make it easier for people to empathize for people who are making the transition, especially if it's medical, and you know, and therefore, like, okay, well, let's put money into the studies so that we make sure that we're
mm,
doing the best, you know, thing and doing right by these people. And I just generally think that's kind of what's needed for people to come together and properly support. They need to find that part in themselves,
wow.
whatever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.